Welcome back to the Drone Workshop. Today we're going to disassemble the version 1 prototype, and I'm going to walk you through the steps. First, I start off with cutting off the zip ties from the camera plate. Get those cut out. They're kind of interwoven in the frame. Next is to remove the battery strap, and it's also kind of woven into the frame and a little difficult to get out, but not too bad. The next step in disassembly is to remove all of the screws from the bottom and top of the drone that hold the plates together. The screws are hex head, button head M3 5mm screws, and the standoffs that I'm using are 10mm nylon standoffs with M3 threads, and those are for the body and the arms. And around the video transmitter and the camera, I'm using 20mm standoffs with M3 threads. I've noticed sometimes they have a tendency to spin when I take out the screws, so I'll hold on to them with a pair of needle nose pliers, and that allows the screw to come out and the standoff not spin. Hopefully future designs of this drone will utilize less screws, because trying to get inside this thing and work on something or change something around or clean it out is a pain to remove all these screws. So hopefully in the future I'll streamline the design a little bit and do away with some of these screws. In the beginning I actually used nylon screws with the nylon standoffs, and they didn't work so well, and I noticed in crashes they would shear off, and I lost a lot of screws that way. So I've switched over to the steel ones, and the steel screws with the nylon standoff seems to work pretty well. I've stripped out a couple of standoffs, but overall it seems to work pretty good. Next part to come off is the camera mounting plate. It's got slots cut into it so different cameras can mount to it. And after that, off come the shock absorbing mounts that I've been using to try to dampen out some of the vibration in my videos. Once the vibration dampening mounts have been removed, there's a few more screws that hold on the top plate that need to be removed before it can come apart. And I didn't realize it, but I've been flying around with a nylon screw that I'd forgotten in there, so had to switch screwdrivers for a second and get a Phillips to get that thing out. Completely forgot it was there. And there's the top plate off, and a close-up shot of the internals of the drone. The flight controller's there in the middle. And I'm removing a few more screws, get the rest of the frame apart. Nothing super exciting. And a little bit of wiggling here and there to get the ribs to separate. And off comes the top plate. Here's a close-up shot of the speed controllers and all that, and there's a couple of ribs that I've pulled out. My clearances in the cutting those out are a little tight, so they're a little hard to get out, but it makes it for a really rigid frame, as well as they kind of snap in. Next, I'm cutting loose the camera. A couple of zip ties and it's off. And same with the video transmitter, a couple of zip ties and it is off of there. And clipping the zip tie that holds on the battery cable. There's my receiver. Close up of the speed controllers, receiver, video transmitter, camera, flight controller, motors. Let's zoom in a little closer, get a better look. That's my micro receiver. It unplugs easily. And unplugging my FPV camera. And unplugging my video transmitter. Next, I'm going to be removing the leads to my flight controller for the buzzer and my current sensor. Receiver leads. And the connectors that connect all my speed controllers. Now my flight controller is completely disconnected. Forgot which screwdriver to use and decided to take apart from the bottom. Those are nylon nuts. I'm probably going to upgrade those to steel in the future, just for strength and peace of mind. And off comes my flight controller. Getting rid of some of the wires that have just kind of been laying in there after I disconnected everything. Flipped it over, and now I'm going to be taking off the motors. Those circles that are under the motors are actually LEDs that I haven't gotten around to hooking up. Hopefully on the version 2 prototype I will be hooking those up. Get the last screw out and we'll flip the frame over and go around and wiggle on the speed controllers to break loose the double stick tape that holds them on. That thing in the center is a power distribution board. It powers the ESC's flight controller, all the electronics on board, and has a couple of transformers to step down voltage. There's a close-up of the frame with everything off of it. Eventually get those standoffs off, transfer them to the red one when I build it. And there's all the guts kind of laid out of it. For this next part, I've zoomed way in and I have clamped my power distribution board into my helping hands, and I'm just going to be going around and desoldering all these wires from the power distribution board. Little wires are wires that connect to the flight controller, current sensor, video transmitter, camera. The big wires are to my speed controllers, and the two really big wires at the top are to my battery. These aren't the prettiest solder joints, but I've never had to solder two pads on a circuit board like this before. Learned a lot, and I learned not to try to use silver solder for this. Use a rosin core electrical solder. So now that everything's out of the drone, here's everything that went into it. It's 4 motors, 2204s, speed controller, power distribution board, bunch of little wires, camera, flight controller, radio receiver, video transmitter, battery cables, servo leads. That's pretty much all the internals right there on the screen. And here's my frame. It's really bendy on its own. It's almost like a noodle, but once you internally brace it, it becomes pretty dang rigid. Here's where I attempted solvent welding. It It holds okay, but I think if the joint had been a little cleaner and a little straighter, it would have held better. And here is my upcoming project, is building the red drone. That should be my next video. Thank you guys for watching. Tune in next time.